First, Gregory McMichael getting moved to that hospital for claims that he's sick. I'm like, give that man some Tylenol and send him back to his cell. Now we got Derek Chauvin and his lawyer yet again using up them appeal or trying to use them appeals like crazy in order to have his convictions thrown out. And you know what I find to be interesting is if you look back at the past appeals that Derek Chauvin and his attorney have been trying to throw in there to try to get those charges or that conviction drop, they're different every single time. And this one is no different. They don't try to do it on the same thing. And I think that would be silly to try to do it on the same thing, because it's like, if you do it out on one thing and you try to do it on the same thing, is what's the point? So they're trying to throw anything at the wall to see what sticks. But this latest one right here is an absolute doozy. And I'm going to go ahead and read this article from NPR so you can find out why I say that. A lawyer for former Minneapolis police officer, or as I call him, a terrorist, Derek Chauvin, made his case on Wednesday as for why his client's 3 convictions in the murder of George Floyd should be overturned, which the state vehemently rebutted, which is a good thing. That just means that the state's saying, like, no to all 3 of those appeals that you're trying to get in there, or that one appeal you're trying to get in there to get all those convictions overturned. Speaking before a 3-member panel on the Minnesota Court of Appeals, lawyer William Mormon argued that extensive pretrial publicity made it impossible for Chauvin to get a fair trial in 2021, and said the main remedy they are seeking is a new one. So they're blaming that the media, quote unquote, blew this all out of proportion, and that's why the verdict went the way that it did. No, we all saw what Derek Chauvin did on that video. The whole world did. So what are they talking about? They want to make it seem like we didn't see what we saw. Shoot, if we had to rely on the Coonstress in that mockumentary she put out a couple months ago, then yeah, Derek Chauvin probably would be a free man. But good thing we have common sense and live in reality and not la la land. Our primary argument here is that this case could not be tried in Minneapolis because of the pretrial publicity, which was pervasive, and also just the physical pressure on the courthouse, Mormon said. Even if they would have moved this to another location, another state, whatever, it would have still followed him there because everyone saw it. This was an international story, and that happened to blow up really quickly. See, I said the worst thing that could have happened for him was the timing. This was during the middle of the pandemic. Everybody was at home, so people had no choice but to witness what happened. If this was just a regular everyday occurrence, you know, and there was no pandemic and we wasn't all at home in quarantine, then this probably would have been another one of those cases where it's just like, oh, it's a here today, gone tomorrow type of thing. But we all saw it. So no matter where they think they're going to take this, it's not going anywhere. It's still lingering even to this day, almost 3 years later. The effects of that. Former acting U.S. Solicitor General Neil Katyal, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, representing the state of Minnesota, countered the defense claim by calling Chauvin's trial one of the most transparent and thorough in our nation's history. He said that many of the arguments before the appeals court do not come close to justifying a reversal, and that even if they did, the evidence of Chauvin's guilt was captured on video for the world to see. Exactly. That's the whole point. We all saw it. So no matter how many appeals you throw out there, it's not going to work. And I'm going to say this before I forget. A lot of people were saying Derek Chauvin getting 20 plus years is not a long time. The fact that they keep doing all these appeals lets you know that those walls are closing in on him right now in that prison. I don't know what kind of prison they have him in. I doubt it's general population, because if it was, he probably would be going up into these court appeals with some bruises on his face, honestly. But you can tell he ain't about that life. And then on top of that, he might be in there with some people he framed. I said being inside of a prison as a prisoner who was a cop is probably hell on earth for them. And I hope he's going through it right now. Each side had 15 minutes to make an opening statement and respond to questions from the judges, after which Mormon had about 5 minutes to give a rebuttal. The panel said it will issue an opinion within 90 days, meaning we can expect the decision by mid-April. Floyd, who was black, died during an attempted arrest on May 25, 2020, after Chauvin, who was white, pinned him to the ground with his knee on his neck for more than 9 minutes. His death was captured in widely circulated bystander video and sparked protests against racism and police brutality across the U.S. and around the world. The following June, after jurors found Chauvin guilty of second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter, Hennepin County Judge Peter Cahill sentenced him to 22.5 years in state prison. So there you go, state prison. A federal judge later sentenced Chauvin to 21 years in prison for violating Floyd's civil rights. So there you go right there. A lot of people say, oh, he only got 22 or 20-some years. No, he got way more than that. Let me read that again just in case people didn't catch it. Judge Peter Cahill sentenced him to 22.5 years in a state prison for the second-degree, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. Then it says a federal judge, who was not Peter Cahill, later sentenced him to 21 years. So when you add all of that up, that's 40 plus years for violating George Floyd's civil rights. They lucky they couldn't get him on a hate crime charge. Now that would have, I'm gonna be honest, that might have been a stretch. So good thing they didn't go for that. Chauvin is serving both sentences concurrently in a federal prison. In Arizona, he waived his right to appeal under the federal plea deal, which is why he's pursuing in state court only. Because of the differences in parole eligibility between the Minnesota prison and system and the federal system, he is poised to spend nearly 3 more years behind bars than he would with only the state murder conviction. In other words, even if Chauvin were to win an appeal in state court, he would still serve a considerable amount of time in federal prison. Still, the AP notes a successful appeal could set a precedent for future cases involving police officers. So there you go right there. It says even if he was to win, he would still do a lot of time. So they're almost basically saying, why even go for it? You're still going to be doing a lot of time. But the thing is, they probably figured if we can knock off half that time, then, I'll still have some breathing room when I get out. At this rate, with the amount of time that he has at his age, he'll probably be damn near half past or dead, period, by the time his time is up. Chauvin formally announced his intention to appeal his conviction and sentence in September 2021, and his lawyers officially filed the request last April. They are asking the Minnesota Court of Appeals to either throw out his conviction and send his case back to the county, reverse the result, or order a new trial in another venue, or order Chauvin a reduced sentence. They say issues with the trial include the considerable pretrial publicity, the city's $27 million settlement with Floyd's family, which was announced during the jury selection process, unrest over a separate police killing in a Minneapolis suburb during that time, and unprecedented courthouse security. They are also alleging prosecutorial misconduct, mishandling of witnesses, and the judge's exclusion of evidence that could have been favorable to Chauvin. Chauvin's defense team has long argued that the trial should have been held elsewhere. I don't know why they keep saying that, because this was seen everywhere. Like, they really think if they would have moved this somewhere else that he would have gotten a fair trial. And that would have been funny to see them move this somewhere else and he would have still got the same sentence, or better yet, well, he would have got the same sentence because he got found guilty of everything. Prosecutors have in turn stated that Chauvin did receive a fair trial and a just sentence, contending that a change of venue wouldn't have made a difference, and noting that the judge took steps to ensure the selection of impartial jurors and shield them from the outside influences. And see, this all goes back to the thing of he feels he did absolutely nothing wrong. That's really what it boils down to and goes back to. Wednesday's hearing offered both sides an opportunity to highlight key pieces of their arguments and answer judges' questions in real time. Some of the issues that came up involve allegations of cumulative testimony by the prosecution, the nuances of presumptive prejudice and permissibility of the third-degree murder conviction. Much of the back and forth centered on one juror, referred to as Juror 52. Chauvin's team is again pushing for what's known as Schwartz's hearing to probe alleged bias, because they said the juror didn't honestly answer a question on the jury selection questionnaire about whether he had attended any protests against police brutality after Floyd's death. The jury did not mention his participation in a Washington, D.C. march honoring Martin Luther King Jr., at which Floyd's death was mentioned, but not the central focus. You see how petty they are? All because they mentioned George Floyd at a Martin Luther King rally or a march. honoring Dr. King. That's what they are equivalent, making this an equivalent of. If they don't sit down somewhere with that, Mormon said if he had answered otherwise, counsel would have asked him more questions before deciding to seat him. One judge on the panel took issue with that, saying the questionnaire used the word protest rather than rally, and that even the defense's brief seemed to acknowledge the difference because it did not use those words synonymously. He added, and Katyal also argued later that Juror 52 was truthful in all of his other questions, including his views on discrimination in the Minneapolis Police Department, Black Lives Matter, law enforcement in general, and his ability to render an impartial verdict. It's not as if Juror 52 was some closeted Trojan horse trying to hide his views. He was as forthright as possible in time and again, Katyal said, adding that the standard requires proving that he necessarily lied, while in his view, the evidence shows at most an honest mistake. Mormon said a Schwartz hearing will not be necessary if the court decides to send the case back to the district court, either to hold a new hearing or choose another venue for one. Let's hypothetically say they went back and did a whole new trial. If they get the same result, then they're going to look like fools. And that means that's more money they had to dish out. The venue was another topic discussed at relative length. Mormon stated that trials should have been held somewhere else in the state, citing jurors' self-expressed concerns for their safety and the fact that the governor had deployed the National Guard throughout the city days in advance of the verdict out of concerns about rights of Chauvin if Chauvin was acquitted. He said the jurors had a personal stake in the outcome of the case because they lived in the community where the riots occurred and believed it would have been a different situation if the trial were held outside of Minneapolis. Katyal disagrees, saying that if pretrial publicity is going to blanket the state, then there is no advantage to shifting the venue. He added that Cahill already said on the record that having the trial in Hennepin County will be safer and actually make the jury more impartial because there were still fears of civil unrest outside the city and security precautions would actually stand out more. The panel pushed back and asked questions of both parties throughout. And while their ruling could be months away, they stressed repeatedly that there's an error correcting court that defers to the district court's discretion, which they said is very broad in many of the areas up for discussion. Let me say this. What Derek Chauvin and his attorney got going on right now is a waste of time. Just do your time. If you wouldn't have messed with George Floyd that day, then you wouldn't be in this situation right now. That's really all it is to it. And like I said, he really feels that he shouldn't be punished for what he did. Makes me wonder, what else has he done and gotten away with? I'm curious. I'm very curious. What else has this dude done that we don't know about? And what's up with that case with him and his wife, him and his frauding wife? You know, with them frauding, what was it, on their taxes, I believe it was. What's going on with that? I haven't heard anything on that since for the last maybe year or two. That should be happening as well. Give him some more times, and if they can, give her some time as well. She thought she would be slick divorcing him or separating herself from that just so she could get herself out of the equation. She ain't slick. Get her too. Put her in some prison orange and see how that looks on her. But yeah, Derek Chauvin is pathetic. But like I said, this shows you right here the weakness and the cowardice that we all know dub S holds and what they've always been. And that, like I said, is a bunch of slick cowards. They are scared of consequence. Like I said, you got Greg McMichael. They want to put him in some kind of a hospital facility or whatever. And now you have Derek Chauvin yet again with his attorney trying to get another appeal. And I hope that this falls through as well. They said they have 90 days. So from now to April, we're going to be keeping an eye on this to see what the decision is.